Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the lottery for the affordable units at Boulevard and Bond in Watertown. My name is David Cashman. I work with SEB Housing. I know that you're all probably quite familiar with us by this point from having submitted your applications. So I'll be doing the lottery drawing tonight, and then I'll be sending you further information tonight after we've done the drawing. It looks like some more households are joining as we speak, so I'm going to just kind of hold on for a second to make sure that people who are joining can be included. While we're waiting, let me just ask, is there anyone who does not know their lottery application number? Anyone who does not know their lottery application number? And if you don't know it, I'll have to ask for your name and I could look it up and tell you. If you do know it, great. You don't need to tell me. Probably better off I don't know. But if anyone who's forgotten it or can't remember, speak right up and I'm happy to look it up for you. Great. Okay. So it looks like everyone knows their number, which is awesome. All right. So let me just give you a little bit of information about what we're going to do. So you've submitted your lottery applications. That's great. I know there was a lot of income and asset and tax documentation that you had to submit. So thanks for getting all of that in. Tonight, we'll be doing the lottery drawing. As you probably know by now, from the lottery drawing, we create waiting lists. This is one step in the process. This is not the final step in the process. In total, there were 50 applicants who submitted complete lottery applications with us. So there will be 50 households, 50 numbers drawn in the lottery. I already have put all of those numbers in our very sophisticated lottery box. They're all on note cards. And I will pick them out one by one, and I will hold them up to the camera as I go and call them out so you can see them. I'll try and work through it pretty quickly so that it doesn't take too long, but I do have to pull them out, hold them up, and simultaneously note in my spreadsheet as I go along. So bear with me. It's going to take me a little longer to kind of do it all and note it than it takes you to just look at it and see it, but I'll do it as quickly and efficiently as I can. So again, 50 numbers will be drawn in this drawing. It'll probably take maybe 10 minutes or so to do it, maybe 15, I'm not sure. Those numbers will be sorted onto the waiting list. Now remember, nobody wins, nobody loses. There aren't any winners in this or losers. Everyone is going to be on at least one waiting list or possibly several, depending on how many units you applied and were eligible for. And there are definitely households in this lottery who applied and were eligible for several different units. So they may be on 2 or 3 or possibly even 4 different waiting lists, maybe more. There will be 7 different waiting lists. There's going to be a waiting list for the 65% AMI studio units. There were 10 of those units, 14 applicants. A waiting list for the 65% AMI one-bedroom apartments. 4 of those units, 27 applicants. There'll be a waiting list for the 80% AMI one-bedroom apartments. 19 of those units, 31 applicants. There will be a waiting list for the 80% two-bedroom AMI apartments. There are 9 of those units, 13 applicants. There will be a waiting list for the 65% one-bedroom disabled accessible apartment. There's 1 of those units, 1 applicant. There's a separate waiting list for the 80% two-bedroom disabled accessible apartment, 1 of those units, 2 applicants. And finally, a waiting list for the 80% three-bedroom disabled accessible apartment. Since there's only 1 3-bedroom unit and it is built out with special features, then everyone who applied for a 3-bedroom unit will be on that list. So that's 1 unit with 12 applicants. If there are any households who indicated need of the special features, they will have priority for those units as contrasted with households who do not need the special features. So I will draw the numbers out of the box. I'll hold them up as I go. If you're wondering as I'm drawing them, like, what does this mean? What can I figure out from this in this moment? The answer is You don't know, and I don't know in this moment either, because there's sorting that has to happen. There's priorities that have to be given, particularly for households who, for the disabled accessible units, we have to give priority to households who need those units. And for larger size units, we have to give priority to larger household types. So like, for example, on the 3-bedroom waiting list, a type 3 household will be above a type 2 household, who will be above a type 1 household. It doesn't matter how they're drawn in the lottery. That's the priorities that we have to implement. And so what that means is, as I'm doing the drawing in front of you, you may be wondering, okay, I'm A.001, I was picked 10th. Am I 10th? You don't know, and I don't know either, because I don't know what waiting lists you applied for. I don't know which waiting lists, the households in front of you or behind you applied for. I don't know what type they are. I don't know what AMI tier they qualify for, and you don't either. The good news is that tonight, before I go to bed, I will send you the waiting list. So and I think virtually everyone has an email who is in the lottery. If there was any households who don't, I will put it in snail mail to you, and you'll get it in a couple days. But if you have email, I will use the email that you provided with your lottery application, and I'll send you the waiting list tonight. The waiting list there'll be PDFs of an Excel document. There'll be 7 different waiting lists, and they will be ordered top to bottom in the order of priority that households get to move forward. So those waiting lists will tell you, okay, where am I, on the 1-bedroom 65% AMI list, or where am I on the 2-bedroom 80% list? That's going to let you know. And the waiting list, they won't have your name, they'll just have your lottery application number. Again, your lottery application number was sent to you when we sent you the letter indicating that you were eligible for the lottery. So if by any chance you forget it between now and then, just check the letter that we sent you, and you'll find your lottery number on the waiting list. And again, it'll be the A dot whatever. This is one step. It's a big step in the process. It's not the final step. This is not there's no guarantee of a unit or anything at this point. This is one big step. We create the waiting list. But the next step is everyone who's invited still needs to apply for a lease with the leasing office. And as hopefully you kind of know by now, being eligible for the program doesn't necessarily mean that you're eligible for a lease. Okay, SEB Housing is the consultant for program eligibility and for running the lottery, but we're not the management team, and we're not looking at your credit history and your past tenant history, and we're not looking to see if you have a criminal background or some of those other things that management teams sometimes look at. Okay, that's the next step in this. So even if you have a really high position on a waiting list, please, don't tell your landlord right now, hey, I'm moving out, I'm number 1 on the waiting list, so I'm moving forward, I'm definitely getting a unit here. I hope you do. I just can't promise you that you will. And it would be unfortunate if you gave that notice and then you go to apply for a lease and they say, hey, we're really sorry, you don't meet our lease screening criteria. Okay. Another thing on that front is, we're mostly looking to make sure that people don't make too much money. We do a more cursory examination to determine if you make enough money to support the lease. Because again, that is a lease screening criteria, just like any other management team. And for both their market rate and affordable applicants, they want to make sure people make enough money to support the rent. We take a quick look at that when you're completing your program application with us, but that's not really our job. We're not doing a real deep dive into that. So that's just another criteria that I'm sure they will be looking at when households apply for a lease. So just something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is the leasing office is not open yet. Okay, it will open on March 1st, they hope, but this is new construction, timelines change. So I will give you their email in one of the documents that I'm going to send to you tonight. but they have asked if you could kindly just be kind of cognizant and courteous of that and not be banging down their door during the next 2 weeks saying, hey, I'm number 2 on the list. When are you inviting me? They're probably going to say, hey, we're really sorry, we're not open yet, but we will definitely be in touch as soon as we are. Another thing is, on the waiting list that I send you, some households will be highlighted in green and some households won't. And this will be talked about in the handout that I also send you along with the waiting list. Households who find their lottery application numbers in green on the waiting list are households who we can say will definitely be invited forward in the next step in this process. And that's because, if there are, just as an example, on the 65% studio waiting list, there are 10 units. So I know that the top 10 households on that waiting list are going to be invited forward. 10 units, they're going to have to at least invite 10 applicants. The households who are in the 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th positions on that waiting list, they may also get invited at some point. I just can't say that for certain yet. It'll depend on what happens with the households ahead of them. And so I haven't highlighted their numbers. Their numbers will not be in green. But just because your number is not in green doesn't mean you're not going to get invited. Okay, it's worth repeating. Just because your number is not in green doesn't mean you're not getting invited. It just means I can't guarantee you that you're going to get invited. You're not in one of the top spots that corresponds to the number of units available on that list. But typically, leasing offices have to invite more people than there are units to fill them. And sometimes they have to invite 2 times as many or 3 times as many people as there are units to fill them. So if you're not in one of the top spots, that is not necessarily reason to despair and think that you're not going to get, to think that you're definitely not going to get invited forward. You may, okay? And on the flip side, if you are in green, that is not licensed to think like I've definitely got a unit, because there's still this second step where you've got to apply. When the leasing office does open and they invite you forward, there will be deadlines for applying and moving forward, and you'll have to pay attention to those. Another thing just to kind of keep in mind is when you do get invited forward, there are 3 different buildings. They are coming online at slightly different times, but I think starting in April and then staggered through May, and then the last building I think right now is scheduled for August. Again, new construction, these things can change, but that's the most current timeline I've been given. But when if and when you do get invited forward, you can choose from any of the available units from the list that you're invited from. And so if you're the number 1 household on a waiting list and you're kind of in a lease right now and you really don't want to move till August, well, you may very well say, hey, I want the unit in the last building that's going to be ready. That's what works best with my schedule. And you can do that. And once you've reserved that unit, then households behind you can choose from the remaining units. Okay. I guess the final thing I'll say, and then I'll do the drawing. I'm sure people are have had enough of listening to me talk. When you do get invited forward from a waiting list, typically you get invited forward from one waiting list at a time. Although if you're on multiple waiting lists, it's possible that you would get invited from multiple waiting lists at the same time. But if you're only being invited from one waiting list, that doesn't give you, you can only choose from units from that list, right? So for example, if you have a really high position on the studio 65% list, but you have a low position on the 1-bedroom 65% list, well, if they invite you from the studio 65% list, you can choose from one of the studio 65% units. You can't use your top studio 65% waiting list position to then say, I'm going to grab one of these 1-bedrooms, which is what I really want, because you don't have a high position on the 1-bedroom 65% list. So you can, moral of that story is you can choose a unit that corresponds to the waiting list from which you're being invited. And by that token, if you're high on a list and you're invited, you can say, hey, you know what? I applied for that. I was eligible, but really at the end of the day, I don't want a studio, so I'm going to politely decline and kind of hope that my number comes up on this other list that I'm on. All right. Are there any questions or anything I can answer before we get started with the actual drawing? Great. Okay. So we will move forward. So let me just tell you, this is all 50 lottery household application numbers. I've already shuffled them up before putting them together. I'm going to put them in the lottery box, and then I will shuffle them up some more, and I'll shuffle them up as I go. And also, as I reach around in here, I'll try and reach and grab from different parts just to make sure we're really grabbing random numbers, giving everyone equal chance. Okay, so without further ado, first number is A.032. A.007. A.016. A.040. A.028. A.009. A.041. A.047. A.037. A.017. A.015. A.013. Okay, we're up to number, this is going to be the 13th number picked here. A.012. A.003. A.027. A.006. A.026. A.022. A.002. A.038. A.025. A.008. A.042. A.033. A.036. A.011. A.043. A.019. A.039. A.020. A.031. A.029. A.030. A.046. Okay, we're up to the 35th number here. A.048. A.034. A.005. A.021. A.050. A.044. It is the 41st number drawn. A.010. A.018. A.045. A.024. A.001. A.014. A.035. A.023. A.049. And the last but not least is A.004. A.004. All right, so that was it. All 50 numbers have been drawn. Like I said, I'll put them on the waiting list in the next few hours here. I'll send you an email before the night's over with the waiting list. I'll also include an attachment that I call the Lottery Night Handout that just has some information about, how many people applied, how the waiting lists are composed, how many people are on each waiting list, and some hopefully useful next steps information, just as a reference. And then, like I said, leasing office expects to be open by March 1st, and just ask for your kind of patience until they're open before moving forward. We will be giving them the waiting list with your information, so they'll have, your email and phone number that you provided to us as your contact information. If that's changed since when you applied for the lottery with SAB, make sure to let them know. But if it's the same, then they have it and they know how to get in touch with you to invite, for next steps if they're inviting you forward. Are there any questions that I can answer before we wrap things up? Or if not, I will, like I said, I'll send you the waiting list tonight. And your next kind of steps will be with the leasing office as people move to the next phase and applying for leases. All right, I'll hang out here for just a minute in case anyone has any questions, but otherwise that's it for the drawing. And like I said, I'll be in touch. No? All right, great. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and great work getting this far, and good luck with next steps. I hope everyone has a great night, and take care. Night.